What's going on, y'all? This is B. Taylor. Thank you for tuning in to part 3 of the 4-part series for how I became debt-free during COVID-19. Now, the previous video, just in case you didn't see that one, I'll quickly recap. It was about finding guidance. What does that mean? I went through a bunch of yeses and nos of what you should and shouldn't be doing, and then having the key takeaways from that. So what were the key takeaways? It was reversing your spending pattern so that you could stop the bleeding. And then changing your mind state was the other big key takeaway for me. This section, part 3, is my favorite because it's actually talking about multiple income streams. That's right. In this section, we're actually going to get into the meat and bones of how we start building. So the first section, part 2, was finding the guidance, stop the bleeding, so that you can set yourself up and not be in a negative situation when you're trying to build wealth. Because if you don't change your spending habits and your spending patterns and how you attack life financially, then when you start making money, basically all you're doing is, if you're already in the hole, you know how to climb out of that hole. So you're going to continue to challenge yourself. If you have more money, you're going to find yourself in a bigger hole and challenge yourself how to get out of that. And then the more money you make, the bigger hole you're going to create for yourself. So you have to change the pattern of the way you deal with your financial situations, right? So that's what part 2 was about. It was finding guidance, stopping the bleeding, and starting to get yourself on the right path. Now we can start getting into building wealth, right? So when I was talking about, multiple income streams, I mean, there were a few things that I got into, right? So I want to quickly get into them. I always wanted a side hustle, but I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. So that's when, when we went into section 2, we were talking about me in my early 20s, trying to find a bunch of side hustles, trying to find those get rich quick schemes and stuff like that. As you start getting older, you'll start to realize exactly what it is you want to do, or what you're good at. And you start sticking with the things that you feel comfortable in, what you're good at. So it took a little while for me to try to figure that out, but there were 3 main aspects of it in terms of how I was able to do additional income streams in addition to my primary source of income, which is my career that I'm working. But I needed to supplement that income to continue to build, because just like anybody else, I was finding myself in a slightly deeper hole, because once you start building a family, you start to increase debt because you have more bills to pay. You have a larger house that you need to have your children live in the house, and so on and so forth. So some of the things that are natural, you can't avoid. Other things you can, in terms of your spending habits. So that's one thing to think about. But the 3 main things that I saw that I was able to start slowly build upon, the first one was real estate. The second one was other side hustles, like other business opportunities that you can get into. So I'll get into that little piece. And then the third one was investing in the stock market in certain aspects, because there's different aspects when you talk about IRAs and retirement accounts. Those are obviously investments that you want to do long-term wealth building for. But then you're talking about shorter-term investments, some that could be riskier. Those were the 3 main things. And I'm going to dig into the first one, which is real estate right now. This is a little tricky because depending on what your focus is going to be, whether it's trying to do real estate investment or flipping homes, whichever avenue you choose to take, you may have a different approach about it. For me, I wasn't the type to try to find a home really cheap, fix it up, and then flip it to sell. I mean, I don't knock anybody that does, but I was looking for more of a long-term sense. So I wanted to start building more and more equity into the home while it was being rented out. My first stab at that was when we were in college. I was actually in Southern Illinois, SIUC. Shout out to them. But, the housing market was pretty cheap, even though I didn't have a career established at that point in time. Coming right out of the military, I got the GI Bill. And then an incredible thing about Illinois is that if you join the delayed entry program into any branch of the military, at least during that time, they paid for your entire tuition, which I really loved because it allowed me to basically leverage all of my GI Bill monies to do whatever it is I wanted to, whether I wanted to screw it off at a club at late night or if I wanted to make an investment, right? So I chose the latter, of course. So I bought a home while I was in college. This was during a time when they were letting almost anybody get a loan. You probably heard of the subprime mortgages, which on the surface, it's absolutely terrible. And as you dig deeper, it's even worse. So there's nothing good about it. But that was the only loan I can get at the time. Lucky for me, the land value was so low during that time period, still is, but it was especially low, compared to the rest of the country, at least during that time. The land value plus the home all together was only about 60 grand. That equated to roughly about $400 a month while we were living there. I tried to sell it, wouldn't sell because it was during the housing crash of '08. So I had to stick with it. But then I was like, hey, it's sitting here on the market for 12 plus months. Take it off the market. Let's put it on the rental market. Within 2 weeks, somebody actually moved in, and then I started collecting rent from it, which was a great thing. It allowed me to start putting more and more equity into that home and eventually pay that guy off. So with the rental income, I was making roughly about $500 a month in rental income. Like I said, it was a $60,000 property value. I financed it 100%. And I was roughly paying $300 a month prior to the point of me completely paying that thing off. Now, everything that I did, this is not something for everybody. It depends on what you want to do with your side hustle income. But what I decided to do was continuously reinvest. So what that meant is every penny that I got from the rental income, it went back towards the home. Either it was for the principal, either it was for other repairs or modifications that I wanted to make to the home. And that allowed me to pay it off much quicker than I would have just letting the payments month by month pay off the loan that way. Once we graduated out of school, it was about 5.5 years after that point. Once I started my career, I was able to throw even more money into it. That way, the home will be paid off, and now it's just an additional supplemental income that's coming in. All of that money has been mine over the past 5 years. I still own the property, so that's a good side hustle income. Like I said, $500 a month. You can choose to have a property manager. Typically, they charge about 10%. So using this example of 500, you pay them $50. They'll make sure they find a tenant for you if something ever goes wrong with the old tenant. And you just pay them that 10%, and then everything else you collect. So it's actually a good thing. I don't have to do anything. Just wait for, the check to come every month. I had another property. I had another set of properties. We just purchased these about 3 years ago. It's another property area, Gulfport, Mississippi. It was relatively low. I was able to get a 4-plex unit, which means 4 units, 4 rental units, all under the same structure for about $250K. I had to put 20% down since it was an investment property at that point. I never had any intention on living in the space. And when you do that, then you have to get either a commercial loan or some other type of investment loan, which meant I had to put 20% down. But, after saving, paying off the house in Illinois, I had some additional income that I can apply towards that 20% to acquire this 4-plex. So just to run through those numbers now, if we look at the 4-plex in Mississippi, it was 4 units. Each unit, when I acquired the properties, were going probably from around $800 to $850 a month. If we just stick with the idea of it being $800 a month times 4, that's $3,200 a month. So right there on the surface, I was collecting $3,200 a month. With a $250,000 loan, 20% down, that it essentially was a $200,000 loan. Principal and interest alone was roughly around $1,350. So I was making a cash flow profit of a little less than $2,000, but that didn't include property taxes, and it didn't include the insurance as well as property management fees. So when you add all of that in, it's roughly around $1,900 to $2,000 a month that I had to pay each month to cover all of those expenses. So even then, I still had about $1,200 a month. Now, that was the loan that I had. It was roughly around 5.5%. Nowadays, you can get it a lot cheaper. But either way, that was the situation I was in. Had it for about 3 years, and just like I did with the first home, I went ahead and reinvested all of the profits and back into the home. Again, whether that was putting it towards principal or whether it was making repairs. This one I shifted slightly differently because there were a lot of units and I was collecting a decent amount, but I knew I was able to collect more. So I put more money towards any repairs and modifications of the homes. I did stuff like ripping out all of the carpets, putting either hardwood planks down or stone tiles. That decreases the amount of maintenance that you require, right? Putting in new appliances, microwaves, ranges, refrigerators, stuff like that, making adjustments to the HVAC systems, right? And they already came with washers and dryers, so that was another plus for any renter who was going to come in and rent the place out. All in all, from 2017 to I think 2019, by the time we hit 2020, after all of the modifications that were being made, the average, I said it was about $800 that it was renting for. And over the period of those 2 years, almost all of the tenants left and we started new leases with new tenants. But in between those times, this is where we made those modifications. So by the time, 2020 hit, I was collecting between $900 and $950 on average per unit, which obviously increases the cash flow. While I was still collecting funding, reinvesting in modifications, and actually putting more down for the principal of the home. So I was collecting about $1,200 a month cash flow, and by the time 2020 hit, I was making between $1,600 and $1,700 a month cash flow after all of the expenses are being paid for. So if you think about that, it was actually a pretty good deal for me. So that was my side hustle for real estate. Hopefully you guys, if you have any questions in regards to the specifics, just leave a comment below and I'll be happy to answer them, or hit me up directly. I'm all right with that.